The rain had long since stopped falling, but the ground still wept. Thick gray clouds smeared the sky like bruises on the face of a dying world. Ash drifted slowly, carried by a bitter wind that no longer remembered the scent of trees or rivers. In the middle of that wasteland, beyond the rusted husks of machines that once screamed war into the heavens, stood a man, alone. His boots were caked in soot and something darker. His name was Elias Rhone, former mechanic, former soldier. Now neither, now nothing. He had not spoken in days. His voice had cracked from grief too many times to be trusted again. His fingers trembled not from cold, but from remembering. Around him lay the bones of a war, not his own jagged alien architecture half swallowed by dirt, glass towers melted into obsidian spires. And among it all, dying slow and silent, was the thing that had once led the invasion, the alien dot. It had no name he could pronounce, only a chittering sequence of clicks he had long since abandoned trying to mimic. He called it gray for the color of its chitin, for the way it looked like storm clouds just before lightning. Gray had been his enemy, then his prisoner, then his patient. Now it was something else entirely, he wasn't sure what. The alien lay slumped against a fractured column of black stone, breathing shallow, translucent blood seeping from the seams of its armored carapace. In its three-fingered hand, it held something strange, something absurdly human. A shovel. Elias stared at the tool, confusion slicing through his exhaustion. Of all the things it could have asked for, it had begged him through weak signs and dying gestures for this. He had found one in the ruins of a collapsed human settlement, handle half burnt, metal head rusted but intact. Now it lay between them and Gray, with trembling limbs, pushed it toward him with desperate reverence. "I don't understand," Elias muttered, even though the words were empty sounds now. Like wind against broken glass, the alien clicked softly, a warble in its voice, like mourning, like memory. It pointed past the wreckage, past the corpses, past the dead war machines, to a jagged rise of ground where something massive had once stood. There, charred into the earth, was a symbol that Elias had seen on every banner, every broadcast, every scorched helmet of the invaders, the crest of their empire. Now it was burned into soil like a wound. The alien tapped its chest once, then the symbol, then the shovel. "Bury it?" Elias said, heart thudding with reluctant comprehension. "You want me to bury your empire?" Gray didn't answer. It just slumped further, eyes those faceted pools of blackness closing with the faintest flicker of what might have been regret. Elias took a step back, the shovel's handle cold in his hand. Around him, silence pressed like a weight. The fields of destruction stretched out forever. He thought of his brother, who had burned alive in orbit when the alien ships came. He thought of his sister, whose lungs had given out in the poisoned air. He thought of his mother, who had died watching the sky fall. He should have hated this thing. Maybe he still did. But hatred was a sharp thing, and he was so tired of bleeding. He looked down at the alien, this warlord or soldier or whatever it had once been. Now it was nothing more than bones wrapped in dying armor, asking for the mercy of memory. Not for itself, but for a world that had tried to swallow his, and somehow, impossibly, it had handed him a shovel. The wind howled low, a sound like mourning, a sound like hope. Elias turned toward the rise where the symbol burned in the dirt. His boots dragged, heavy with ash and grief. Behind him, Gray whispered something in its language, soft, broken, ancient. Elias didn't know the words, but he understood. The shovel bit into the earth with a soft, resistant crunch, and so it began. Asterisk, asterisk, the earth was tougher than it looked. Beneath the ash, beneath the brittle crust of scorched soil, the ground clung to the secrets of 1,000 deaths. Elias felt every thrust of the shovel in his spine, a dull throb echoing through his muscles with each heave. He didn't know. What he was digging, was it a grave, a monument, or just a hole to forget something monstrous? The meaning shifted with every motion. The sweat on his brow stung the corners of his eyes, and still he dug. The alien behind him made no sound. Elias hated the silence. It was the kind that screamed louder than noise, the kind that wrapped itself around your ribs and tightened with memory. He glanced back once to make sure Gray was still breathing. The alien's chest still rose and fell, shallow but steady. It hadn't moved since handing over the shovel, as if whatever remained of its spirit had bled out with the gesture. The sun never shone here anymore. Not since the skies were blackened by the ignition of orbital engines and dying satellites. The light that filtered through the clouds was pale and sickly, casting long shadows that seemed to follow Elias like ghosts. He wished one of them was his brother or his sister, or anyone human, but there was only Gray, the thing they had feared, the thing that had taken everything. He stopped digging and turned to face it fully. Why? He asked, the word sharp. Horse. Gray's eyelids peeled back slowly, its gaze locking with his. Those eyes were alien, bottomless, but not cold. Not anymore. Its mandibles twitched. Then slowly, it raised one hand and tapped its chest again. A hollow thunk echoed from the armor beneath. It repeated the gesture, then gestured outward at the wreckage, the burnt symbols, the silent bones. Elias stepped closer, heart pounding. You led them here, didn't you? You were one of them? Gray didn't deny it. You killed us, Elias whispered, voice trembling with something tangled between rage and grief. You destroyed everything. Gray's eyes closed. And then, with painful effort, it reached toward the dirt beside it, claws carving awkward shapes. It was trying to draw something. Elias crouched, watching, confused as lines and circles took shape. At first it looked like nonsense, then it looked like a star map. A spiral. Dots that connected. Arrows that pointed inward. Then a hand now. A shape fingers, claws. Both. Gray tapped the center. They sent you, Elias said, breath-catching. But you didn't want to come. Gray tilted its head. One slow nod. So you fought for them, but not with them? Gray raised its hand, made a motion like a cut across the throat, then pointed to the sky, and finally touched the burned crest. On the ground, they're gone. Elias felt his knees buckle, not from weakness, but the weight of it all. He dropped beside the alien and let the shovel fall to the side with a dull clatter. You're the last one. Gray didn't respond out the wind. Picked up again, swirling ash into spirals around them. Elias stared at the symbol branded into the dirt, now just a scar in the earth. Part of him wanted to walk away. Just leave the alien to rot like it had left his people. But he couldn't. The shovel still lay within reach, and now, strangely, it felt like it belonged in his hand, not as a weapon, not even as a tool, but as a promise. A small, stupid human promise. He picked it up again and continued digging. When he paused to drink from his canteen, he offered it to Gray, the alien's. Claws trembled as it took the container. Its mandibles clicked softly as it drank, or tried to. Water trickled from the cracks in its armor, mixing with the dust on the ground. Elias helped steady its grip, silently, without words. As the hours dragged on, Elias didn't speak again. He just dug, and with every scoop of soil, his mind wandered. To old laughter, to the warmth of campfires long gone, to the way his mother used to hum while stitching torn fabric, to the stories she told him about forgiveness, that it wasn't weakness, that sometimes it was the strongest thing a person could do, that it was human. And now here he was, proving her right, or being made a fool by an alien that had once led a war of extinction. But something told him Gray wasn't playing a game. The way it looked at him now, hollow and tired, it wasn't the look of a conqueror. It was the look of someone who had seen too much and carried too much and just wanted it to end. As night fell, Elias lit a flare and planted it near the edge of the pit. The hole was deep now, enough to bury more than a body, enough to bury a symbol, a legacy, an empire. He sat beside the alien, their shoulders almost touching. He didn't flinch from the proximity. He didn't ask any more questions. He simply existed beside it. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't unbearable. It was shared. The second night came like a whisper, low and mournful. The ash that once drifted lazily now settled in a stillness that felt sacred, as if even the sky had agreed to pause. The fire Elias had built crackled weakly, its heat doing little against the creeping cold, but he didn't mind the chill. He welcomed it. After so many years of burning, of war and smoke and loss, the cold felt like an honest thing. It did not pretend to care. It simply existed. So did he. Gray sat opposite him, legs folded awkwardly, posture slumped. The light of the fire danced over its armor, revealing scratches and grooves like battle scars carved into steel. Elias found himself staring at them, not with suspicion but curiosity. Each one was a story, he realized, just as the lines on his own palms were maps of every tool he'd ever gripped too tightly. Every weapon swung in desperation, every body carried through rubble. Without thinking, Elias rolled up his sleeve and showed the long scar running from his wrist to elbow. Fuel line ruptured. Reactor went up. he muttered, voice barely above the fire's whisper. 3rd year of the invasion. Lost most of my squad, should have lost this arm too. Gray tilted its head, then slowly raised one clawed hand and traced a pattern along its side, revealing a strange, crescent-shaped gash. The flesh beneath shimmered faintly, unnatural. It made a soft sound, not quite a growl, not quite a sighed-out pain. Recognition, shared silence. They didn't speak the same language, but they were speaking now. Elias tossed another charred branch into the fire. Sparks shot upward like dying stars. You know what I miss most? He said, eyes reflecting the flame. The smell of bread. Stupid, right? Not my family, not my home. Bread. The scent of it baking in the morning. Warm, safe, ordinary. Gray watched him. Then, with surprising delicacy, scratched something into the ash between them with one long claw. A symbol, a square shape with waves rising from it, little spirals above like steam. You had it too, Elias whispered. You remember it? Gray nodded slowly. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the dark, metal groaned and collapsed, swallowed by its own weight. Neither of them looked away from the fire. Elias leaned back against a slab of stone and let his body sink into the earth. He closed his eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to imagine. He imagined what Gray's world might have looked like before all this, before the weapons, before the orders, before the war that crushed them both. He pictured a marketplace with unfamiliar colors. Children, whatever their version of children, was laughing in tones no human ears could reproduce. He imagined those spirals of steam rising into a sky with 2 suns. Then he pictured it all burning. He opened his eyes, throat tight. You lost your home, didn't you? Gray didn't move. Elias turned to face it. You didn't just lose a battle. You lost everything. Gray's mandibles twitched. Then, carefully, it reached into the pouch strapped to its side. It pulled out a small, cube-shaped object worn, blackened, nearly cracked in half. It hummed faintly, like a music box remembering a melody it couldn't quite complete. Gray held it gently, as if afraid it would crumble in its claws. A hologram flickered to life above it. A short loop of movement, no more than 10 seconds. A towering alien city bathed in light. Children, yes, children running through strange trees that glowed with internal fire. Laughter, not in sound but in color, rippled through the vision, and then it ended. Gray clutched the cube to its chest. Elias swallowed hard. The tears that came weren't for his own people this time. They were for something he never thought he'd mourn. An enemy's childhood, a civilization too far gone to save. The unbearable human grief of knowing that some things are beautiful only in memory. He stood and walked toward the pit, looking down at the hole he had carved. It was big enough now, more than enough. He could have stopped digging earlier, but he hadn't, and now he knew why it wasn't just for Gray. It was for what they both had lost. He returned to the fire, sat down slowly. This time, when the cold pressed in, he didn't move away. He let it settle. He let it speak. You gave us nothing but pain, he said quietly. But I think you tried to stop them. Gray didn't confirm. It didn't need to. You were one voice in a chorus of war, Elias murmured. I've been that voice too. For the first time, Gray reached out, not to hand him something, not to plead, just to rest its claw beside Elias's hand. Nat. Touching, just near, a gesture of trust. A truce. A moment, and Elias let it stay. The fire burned lower, but it did not die. Somewhere, under ash and silence, something like peace had begun to grow. Asterisk, the fire had burned down to coals by the 3rd day. Elias had not spoken much since the hologram. It haunted him. Those glimpses of innocence shattered. Their colors burned into his mind more vividly than any battlefield. He kept digging, though his hands were blistered, though the shovels. Weight grew heavier with every hour. Gray grew weaker. Its limbs twitched now and then, as though fighting some sickness within. Elias had wrapped it in his spare coat, the one he used to use on recon missions in the frozen north, and still the alien's breath came in slow, ragged bursts. It hadn't eaten. He didn't know if it could anymore. Then, late in the day, the machine woke. Elias had wandered a few hundred meters from the pit, searching the crumpled remains of a supply shuttle for rations. That was when he heard it, the unmistakable hum of power rising from dormancy, a frequency that clawed at his skull. He turned fast, heart slamming against his ribs. Smoke trailed from the rise where the alien symbol was burned into the dirt. The soil trembled. He sprinted back, leaping over charred wreckage and jagged steel. Gray was on its feet, or trying to be, clutching the side of the pit with one claw while staring at the earth with eyes wide in alarm. Below the soil, something pulsed. Elias skidded to a halt beside the alien. What the hell is that? Gray's voice rasped, dry as bone. It said one word in its language, then tapped the ground with urgency. Elias didn't understand the word, but he understood the meaning well enough that something was buried. Not just an empire, a machine, not dead, dormant. He stared into the pit he had dug, now buzzing with faint energy. Pale blue light flickered in lines beneath the soil, forming symbols and circuits like veins. It hadn't been a grave, it had been a seal. Or maybe a lock. He turned back to Gray. You knew this was here. Gray made no gesture of denial. Instead, it fell to one knee, digging into the edge of the pit with its claws, as if trying to remove something, disable something. Elias joined it, the shovel now moving with desperation. They worked in frantic silence, tearing away layers of soil, exposing a metal surface beneath. Runes glowed brighter now, no longer blue but red dot armed. Active. What is it? Elias gasped. A weapon? Gray nodded, weakly. Then tapped its chest. Then the crest burned into the dirt. Then pointed at the pulsing surface. The meaning struck. Like thunder, this machine was not just a remnant. It was the contingency, a final command. The Empire's last breath, something left behind in case of defeat, something that would not die quietly. It had been buried under their own symbol, like a seed of vengeance. And Gray had known, and chosen not to awaken it. You were supposed to activate this, Elias whispered, horror crawling through him. You were the failsafe? Gray shook its head slowly. It tapped the cube, still strapped to its chest, then the shovel. Not a failsafe anymore. I buried the fuse, Elias said aloud, piecing it together. And you gave me the means to bury the match. The machine beneath them hummed louder. A voice, mechanical and cold, rose from its depths, broadcasting in multiple languages. Some Elias recognized, others he didn't. It gave a countdown. Minutes. Gray, Elias said, grabbing the alien's shoulder. Tell me how to shut it down. Gray's mandibles twitched. It drew a symbol in the dirt, a circle within a triangle, and pointed to the edge of the pit, where a panel had begun to rise. Then it did something Elias did not expect. It bowed, not deeply, not theatrically, but with the weight of one who carried the guilt of millions. It pressed the cube into Elias's hand, fingers lingering just a moment too long. No, Elias said. We do this together. Gray pushed him back gently and then turned toward the pit, claws working the controls now exposed on the panel. Sparks burst from the metal as it resisted the override. The alien staggered, claws digging into wires, pulling them free with agonizing slowness. Elias shouted something, he didn't even know what, and dove in beside it, jamming the shovel into the exposed circuitry. The machine screamed. The countdown stuttered. 9 minutes. I don't care who made this, Elias growled. We end it, now. Together, they ripped at the machine's guts, disabling what they could. The symbols changed, red to yellow, the voice distorted. Sparks danced like lightning around them, but Elias knew they wouldn't make it in time. Not this way. Gray did two, and then it looked up at him with those endless eyes. No hate, no fear, only farewell, it. Stepped forward, claws pressed to a final panel. Now glowing with pulsing light. Wait, Elias breathed. Don't. Gray slammed its palm onto the symbol. There was a blinding pulse of blue dot and then silence. When Elias opened his eyes, the ground was still. The pit was quiet. The light had faded. Smoke curled upward like incense from a tomb. Gray was gone. All that remained was the cube, resting in Elias's hand, still warm. He fell to his knees. He didn't cry. Not this time. He simply knelt in the dirt beside a buried empire and whispered something old, something sacred. Rest. And the wind answered. Elias sat at the edge of the pit long after the silence had returned. The cube in his hand still pulsed, softer now, like a heartbeat slowly fading. He turned it over again and again, trying to make sense of what he had just survived. Or perhaps what he had just witnessed. The alien was gone, disintegrated or consumed in whatever fusion of energy had shut down the machine. The final breath of an empire had been stopped not with force, but with sacrifice, with choice. The cube replayed its loop every time he pressed the central crystal, those children laughing, the trees glowing, the alien sun setting over silver towers. A dream now, nothing more, but the ground no longer trembled. The machine was dead. Gray had seen to that. Yet Elias felt no peace. He had buried the Empire, yes. But now something heavier remained. A question that burned into the back of his mind. Like a smoldering ember, why leave him alive? He returned to the crash site that night, wandering alone among the skeletal remains of human and alien vehicles, looking for supplies, hoping the walk would quiet his thoughts. It didn't. Instead, it brought him back to the old comms relay buried under a twisted mass of steel. By some miracle or curse, it still functioned. The screen was cracked. The power flickered. But when he twisted the dial and angled the receiver to the northern sky, the static changed .voices, .human voices. Any survivors reading this? Respond, his chest tightened. The voice was faint, battered by distance and interference, but unmistakably human. A military signal, still active. Still scanning. He leaned in closer, heart pounding. This is Recon Base. 9 orbital scans show isolated heat signatures requesting verification. Elias stared at the microphone. It had been 3 years since he'd heard another human voice not inside his own memories. He lifted the mic slowly, pressing the transmit key. This is Elias Rhone, he said, voice cracking. Survivor, groundside, signal strong. I'm alive? The static wavered. Elias Rhone? Rhone, former engineer, Omega Unit, is that you? He blinked, stunned. Yeah, that's me. More static. Then, we've been monitoring this sector for residual tech. Something flared an hour ago. Massive energy spike. We thought it was a trap. What the hell did you do down there? Elias looked over his shoulder. Back toward the pit, the dead machine buried beneath. The ashes of the one who had stopped it. I buried the last weapon, he said quietly. And the one who chose not to use it. Silence stretched again. Then a sharper, colder voice broke through the channel, an officer, no doubt. Rhone, listen. That flare matched known war-era codes. You may have uncovered strategic tech. Do not leave the site. A retrieval squad is en route. Elias hesitated. You don't understand. It's not just tech. It was a message. A surrender, a funeral. Another voice. That machine under the surface, was it active? He didn't answer immediately. Rhone, was it active? Yes, and you disabled it? I didn't, Elias said. We did. A pause. You're not alone? I wasn't. He could feel the tone change instantly on the other end. Whispered conversations. Orders being relayed. New urgency. Stay. Where you are, the voice commanded. Repeat, do not move. If there are any alien artifacts or biologicals, they will be taken into custody. Elias stared at the cube in his hand. The image played again. Laughter, color, innocence, all gone. All reduced now to the single most valuable object on this dead world. He turned off the comm. Not out of fear, but out of choice. They would come. For it, they would take the cube, dissect it, rewrite its meaning, turn it into data, strategy, leverage. They would desecrate a burial with research papers and containment units. And Gray's choice, its last final resistance against an empire. It had once served, would become fuel for a new war. Elias stood in the ruins, staring at the black horizon. Somewhere north, the retrieval squad was already moving. He could wait and hand over the cube. Let the world do what it always did: consume, weaponize, forget, or he could disappear. He could walk into the Deadlands, past the ruins and ghosts, and dust, and find another place to bury this piece of memory, or maybe share it. Not with the generals, but with people, survivors, kids. Let them see the laughter. Let them remember the enemy had children too. He gripped the cube tight, a hard decision. But not a complicated one. He went to the pit one last time. Scooped a handful of the black soil. Let it pour through his fingers like a slow hourglass. Rest, he whispered again. I'll carry it now. Then he turned, slung his old pack over one shoulder, tucked the cube deep inside, and started walking away from the signal, from the searchlights, from the war, because some things aren't meant to be studied. Some things are meant to be remembered. Asterisk, asterisk, Elias Rhone walked through the ruins of 1,000 dead voices, his breath fogging in the cold air that rose as the wind changed. Night had returned, darker than before. Not because the sky had dimmed further, but because the searchlights had begun to pierce the horizon behind him. They were close, closer than he'd hoped. He had maybe an hour, maybe less. Still, he didn't run. He walked with the quiet certainty of a man who no longer feared being hunted. The cube pulsed gently in his pack, just beneath the ragged flap of his coat. Its rhythm matched his steps. Or maybe his heartbeat had simply surrendered to it. The land grew crueler as he moved south-twisted metal plains, broken by collapsed towers. Remnants of orbital wreckage frozen in craters. He passed bodies half buried in ash, both human and alien, their features long since erased by time and wind. He did not look away. He honored them the only way left to him, by walking forward, and then at the edge of a shattered ravine where the bones of a city lay beneath a skin of black sand. The searchlights found him. They came in silence at first 5 black craft, humming just above the ground. Engines whispering like breath on glass. No markings, no flags, but Elias knew the type. Tactical retrieval, ghost teams, they didn't save people. They salvaged what the war had left behind. The ships landed without sound, kicking up sheets of ash that swirled around him. From the side doors, figures emerged in full-body suits, sleek, faceless, efficient. Each one cradled a rifle like a child, held with practiced care, but their weapons weren't pointed. Not yet. Elias Rhone, a voice barked from the lead suit, male. Commanding, cold. You are in possession of prohibited post-war technology. You are ordered to surrender it immediately. Elias stood still. No. The word left his mouth with calm, absolute weight. No. The voice repeated, you do not have authority to refuse. Elias dropped his pack to the ground and reached in slowly, pulling the cube from its place. The suits tensed. Weapons raised, just enough to let him know they would fire if provoked. But he didn't raise the cube like a threat. He held it in both hands, gently like an offering. It glowed softly in the dark, casting a pale reflection across his scarred face. This, Elias said, is not a weapon. It's a memory. That's all it's ever been. The suits moved in a semicircle around him. That artifact contains encrypted cultural data, the voice said. Alien strategic history, possibly coordinates. Even dormant AI signals. You have no idea what you're holding. I do, Elias replied. I held its hand when it gave it to me. A pause. Confusion flickered through the stillness. The officer stepped forward, helmet tilting slightly. It? Gray, Elias said. The one you'd have studied. The one you'd have tortured. For intel, the one who died so that your cities wouldn't. An alien, the voice replied coldly. An enemy of the species. They murdered billions. And one of them stopped the last machine before it could kill again. Elias snapped. One of them made a choice none of us had the courage to. They broke from their empire, buried their past, buried themselves, and gave me this to remember. It by. The wind howled between them, pulling his coat wide, ash flurrying into his hair and lashes. He stepped back to the edge of the ravine. You're not taking it. You don't have a choice, the officer warned. That cube is a Classa anomaly. We will open fire. Elias looked down at the abyss behind him, then back at the faceless men before him. His hand trembled, but not with fear. With the knowledge that this would be his final moment as a soldier, as a pawn, as anything they ever tried to mold him into. He had buried their war. He would not let them dig it up again. I didn't survive this long just to become one of you, he said softly. This isn't intel, it's truth. It's grief. It's a funeral that no one came to. You're outnumbered. I know. A gun clicked. Another lifted higher. A red dot found his chest. Still, Elias did not move. Then he did the only thing left to do. He held the cube to his chest, turned his body to the ravine, and stepped back. The wind caught him. The light swirled. Gravity reached up like a hand from the abyss. The soldiers shouted. Too late. But he didn't fall far. Not because he stopped, but because something caught him. A light flared beneath, impossibly gentle, like the ghost of Gray itself, lifting him into the hollow belly of the ravine with unseen wings. He floated, just for a moment, held by a soft hum that vibrated in his bones. The cube pulsed brighter dot, and then it spoke, not in words. In music. In memory dot, the image flared from the cube, mitter larger this time, glowing for all the suits above to see. The alien children, the glowing trees, the world that had been, the life that had been. A funeral, yes, but also a plea. Let it be enough. The soldiers did not fire. They did not descend. They simply stood at the edge of the cliff, bathed in the memory of what had been lost. And Elias Rhone, survivor of nothing, protector of a single truth, vanished into the earth his footsteps swallowed. his purpose fulfilled. Years passed. The world healed in slow, uneven breaths. The skies never turned blue again, but the sun sometimes managed to pierce the clouds with thin gold ribbons, enough to grow things, small patches of green, stubborn weeds that clawed up through ash and fractured concrete. Humanity rebuilt not in triumph, but in reflection. The cities they raised were quieter, the lights softer, the walls built more from necessity than pride. People remembered at least those who chose to. They told stories passed down like fragile heirlooms, each version a little different. And in some corners of the world, whispers of a man named Elias Rhone still drifted like wind through broken glass. They said he vanished near the southern ravines, swallowed by the earth or by the ghosts of the war. Others believed he had gone deeper, to where machines still dreamed and the dead still waited. A few swore he had become a myth, a guardian of something ancient, an echo of peace born in the ruins of violence. No one could agree on the details. Only one thing remained unchanged in every version. He carried the cube dot, and with it, a memory dot not long after the war ended. A child found something near the base of an old ravine, an object smooth and humming with light, half buried in stone. The child, no older than 8, brushed the dust from its surface and held it gently in their small hands. The cube pulsed once, then projected a hologram into the air. The alien children running beneath fire trees, the laughter like music, the sky alive with light. The child watched, wordless, as the vision unfolded. It ended with the image of a tall figure human walking side by side with a gray, insectoid shape into the horizon, their silhouettes vanishing into gold dot. The child took it home dot, and for the first time in a long time, a family sat together and watched something beautiful. The image played again and again. People began to gather. They didn't understand what it was at first. Some thought it was alien propaganda. Others thought it was a warning. But the children, they understood. They didn't need words. They saw the trees. They saw the laughter. They saw the hand of a human resting near the claw of a creature once feared. And they felt something ancient, something strong. Empathy. Eventually, the story spread beyond the ruins. Not as a report, not as data, but as a tale retold in village. Squares and quiet rooms and late-night broadcasts where tired survivors listened not to strategy or science, but to something real, something human, a man who chose not to hate, a soldier who chose to bury instead of burn, a grave built not for vengeance, but for forgiveness. They built no statues for Elias Rhone. He would have hated them. Instead, they planted trees where they believed he walked one for each year since the silence fell. The trees grew twisted, stubborn, clawing at the wind. But they grew, and among them, children still run. Their laughter, fragile as smoke, lingers on the breeze, and beneath those trees, buried in soil that once burned, is a single item, a rusted shovel, its handle cracked, its blade dulled by time. No one moves it. No one dares. It belongs there, because someone once used it not to destroy, but to remember, and that is the most human thing of all.